Veritas Oquitus by Bones Boy 15, Chapter 17. Purpose? Killed? Yang asked. Naruto looked down from the moon to meet her wide-eyed gaze, his blue eyes filled with regret and sadness. Not everyone can be saved, Naruto repeated as he looked back at the moon. Not everyone wants to be helped. You have to understand, Yang. I didn't go out of my way to kill him. He had to be stopped, but words, they just couldn't cut it. With his eyes squeezed shut, Naruto broke his hand away from Yang's, which was still stuck on his first statement, the admission of killing another. It was understandable. Not many knew of Naruto's greatest shame outside of those high in the food chain. He went to a nearby bench to sit down and recompose himself. His gaze went back to the moon, so peaceful, but broken. How it broke and why were questions since they had yet to answer, mysteries that may forever remain unsolved. It was soothing and reminded Naruto of life in general. Sometimes you're fine, and sometimes there's pain that'll go away, and sometimes there's constant pain. The bench creaked lightly as Yang sat down next to him. What was he like? Gara? Naruto let out a bitter laugh. He was crazy. Something wasn't right in his head. He needed help, but refused it at every turn. Every chance he had to heal, he spat on. Poor guy was deluded by a belief he developed while he was raised by the Fourth War. They raised him? Yang asked incredulously. Naruto looked at her. Raised is being generous. They corrupted him, pushed him far beyond the limit, tried to hone his semblance into a weapon to use against Faunus and Faunus lovers. In the process, he stopped thinking of himself as human and called himself a monster. That's horrible. Yang clenched her hands into fists. They twisted a kid so far that he broke. What the hell's wrong with them? Hate. Naruto mumbled softly as he held his parents' rings up and looked at the diamond on his mother's ring. They hate Faunus for being different, hunters for being arrogant, and humans for being complacent. The Fourth War is comprised of people who are poisoned by hate. Unfortunately, Gaara fell victim to this poison, so he hated everyone. Yang asked slowly. I don't see that as the reason you had to kill him. I didn't have to kill him. I didn't even want to kill him. Naruto shot back firmly as his eyes glared into hers. The glare dropped when he noticed Yang's weren't filled with accusations, but questions. Naruto looked away, ashamed at his anger and of his reaction. Gaara was alone, like Sasuke, like me. He was alone in the worst place possible. Naruto's words were soft and filled with heavy emotions. He was born in the sands of Akuo to a woman without a name. Something happened between then and the age of 6, something that caused him to be brought up amongst the Fourth War. I never found out what it was. All I know was that he was alone in a world that refused to acknowledge him as a human, so he followed suit and adapted. If he couldn't be a human, and he certainly wouldn't be a Faunus, then he would be a monster. Tell me how you met him. Yang put a hand gently on his arm. Please. It wasn't a request, and it didn't have to be. Naruto stared at the diamond on his mother's wedding band and became lost in the reflected moonlight. When we were a certain age, some students in Backrow volunteered for a joint competition. The academies would switch between hosting every half year. Sasuke and I were so lucky that during our time to volunteer, you would be hosted at our home. Naruto paused for a moment as his eyes drifted shut. I met Gaara a few days before the tournament. After Sasuke and I stopped his assigned teammates from attacking a kid that ran into him. The second I met him, I could tell something was wrong with the guy. A boy with pale skin, red hair, and a large goat on his back dropped down from the branch of a tree to land between a younger Naruto and a boy in a black suit with a large bundle on his back. Around his green eyes were thick dark rings, and his clothes looked like they belonged to someone who'd wandered the desert for years. Faded and brown, the boy turned and glared at the black-suited boy. Shut up, Kankuro, or I'll kill you. The boy, Gaara, spoke gravely, with a rough voice. The lone girl of the group silenced the other boy, Kankuro, before he could speak again. Gaara had his arms crossed over his chest as he spoke to Naruto and Sasuke. You two are strong. I wait the day when I kill you both. He really said that? Yang asked, horrified. May the wise Om sour my ramen forever if I lied to you now. Naruto swore with a hand. He had a serious frown on his face as he continued. His tone and his teammates' reactions showed me that he felt no qualms about doing so. Yikes. Yeah, Naruto said with a prominent frown as he continued to look at his mother's ring. Next time I saw Gaara was in the preliminary matches, which came after the first and second events and would lower the competition for the finals. Geez, this sounds like the Vital Festival tournament, Yang said thoughtfully, only less about harmony and more about bragging rights. That's what the point was. Naruto said somberly. Vacuo's villages need funding, and it's not an easy thing to come by. So our tournament is broadcast to other kingdoms and to the schools. My team and I are already counting down the days for the next one so that we can watch it. So what happened in the preliminary fights? Yang asked in an attempt to get away from any political talk. That stuff always bored her. Naruto gave a little chuckle. Well, after I beat one of my old friends in a fight with a fart. Liar! Yang cut in with a smirk. I'm not. Look it up. Naruto said with his own grin. That fight went viral. Has nearly 1 million views. Sucks too, because I got my ass kicked for most of it. But after I beat him, I managed to witness an older student of Khan fight against Gara, and Gara's semblance was scary. Define scary, Yang said with a small frown. Naruto shivered and gained a haunted look in his eyes. He can control sand. He used the sand to crush people. Oh God, yeah. As much as an unstoppable monster he seemed to be, he lacked one valuable quality: speed. Naruto said his opponent in the preliminaries last match, Rock Lee, had trained his body to move at speeds that can rival Ruby's semblance. Yang stared at him. Is that even possible? Well, yeah, I just said he did, right? Touche. Rockley was a boy with a black bowl haircut and large black eyebrows panted as he stood across from Gara. He had been beaten into the ground, and the sand-like armor around his body had been cracked. Rockley wore a skin-tight green unitard with orange greaves on his legs, a red belt around his waist, and white tape around his arms. He looked exhausted. Wait, he was dressed like Professor Guy? Yang asked. Rock Lee was Guy's apprentice. Naruto chuckled lightly. The next beautiful green beast. That's a scary thought. Yang mumbled with a light shiver. She couldn't stare at Guy. He was just too Guy-like to admire his build, and Yang never passed down a free show. That's an understatement. Naruto sighed and gave her a small look. Look, Yang, this is hard for me to talk about, so could you please stop interrupting me? Sorry, go on, Naruto. I'm listening. The boy just used up the rest of his aura in a final, life-threatening move that he'd learned from Guy. He was technically unconscious on his feet, and it was a miracle that he was still alive. Gaara's stand shot out at the same time that Gaara extended his arm and encased the boy's right arm and leg. A loud crunch was heard, and Rock Lee screamed as blood rushed from his limbs over the sand. Before Gaara could deal any more damage with his sand, Guy interfered with the match, and Lee was declared the loser. Since Gaara still had aura to spare and could continue fighting despite his beaten state, I doubt the outcome would have changed much, except maybe Lee could have died. Lee was rushed to the hospital, and the preliminaries were called to a close. Then we got a month break to train and recuperate for the finals. Naruto said with a smile as he thought back to his training. I got some help from my godfather, and Sasuke got help from my favorite teacher, which he would need since he was set to face off against Gaara first. What? Then how did? I'm getting there, Naruto said to his confused girlfriend. Before the final battle began, I ran into Gaara again at the hospital. Was he injured? Yang asked. Or were you? Neither, Naruto said with a chuckle. He rubbed his head. Another of my old friends was recovering from his preliminary fight, so I decided to kill two birds with one stone and visit both him and Lee. Naruto's smile fell from his face as he turned away from Yang and stared off into the distance once again. Good thing I did too, because Gaara was going to kill Lee. Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? Naruto demanded after he punched the red-haired boy hard in the face. He and another boy, Shikamaru, stood in Lee's hospital room doorway and glared at the red-headed boy. Gaara had been paralyzed by Shikamaru's semblance, dubbed the shadow snare by the children, and Naruto capitalized on the act to save the unconscious older boy. Gaara stared at Naruto impassively. I'm going to kill him. Stay out of my way, or I'll kill you too. Troublesome as it is, I can't just let you kill him, Shikamaru said with a grimace as he rubbed his cheek. His semblance allowed him to control his opponent's movements, but he also felt their pain. Damn, Naruto, did you hit him hard enough? Naruto ignored him and glared at Gaara. Why would you kill him? Because he stumped you in your fight? That doesn't make any sense. Careful, Naruto. He could be very petty, and with how dangerous he is, it would be troublesome to fight him. Gaara ignored Shikamaru and glared at Naruto. I don't care about the fights. If I had lost, I would have died. I did not lose. I continue to exist, and therefore I must prove my existence. Prove your. Would you just make some goddamn sense? Naruto returned, frustrated with the sound of crazy that wafted off of this guy. What is existence? Existence is a state of being in the living organism with a purpose, something even grim have. As a child, I have no purpose, therefore I did not exist. To not exist is to be dead, not on this world. but I am here, so I need purpose. Gara's dead glare turned into a crazed grin. I found a purpose when I was 6, after a man who called himself leader told me of a way to prove it. To kill all who threatened my existence, phonics, grim, or even human. Naruto and Shikamaru could only stare at the boy in horror. The crazed redhead let out a dark chuckle before he groaned and put a hand on his head. Gaara took a moment to breathe before he returned to being the stoic maniac that they knew him to be. For if I cannot prove that I exist, then why am I alive? He wanted to kill me, but I realized that I didn't want to die. I wanted to be alive, to prove that I had worth of living. It was on that day that I screamed at the world that I am alive. I will not die by threats to my existence. I will my existence will. I have been told that to protect something with your life is to mean you love it more than anything. In that case, I love myself and only myself. Everything and everyone else on this planet, in this universe, can burn so long as I continue to live. All threats to me must be extinguished. That is my purpose. What kind of purpose is that? Shikamaru asked, while Naruto trembled beside him. You are nuts, crazy. I agree with Shikamaru now, Naruto said softly, while Yang stared at him. Naruto's face clenched tightly. Gaara was sick, he needed help, and if I tried just a bit harder, maybe if I held back more and didn't let my anger get to me. He paused and sighed. Maybe if I accepted that we were the same then, I wouldn't have tried to be so distant from him. You're nothing like Gaara, Yang quickly retorted. You said it yourself, Gaara was sick. He wasn't just sick, Yang, he was lonely, Naruto said softly. He rubbed his face tiredly. I couldn't see it then, but there was a boy inside of him that wanted a friend, not a caretaker or a partner. He wanted someone to acknowledge him, someone to confirm that he was alive and had purpose. Naruto let out a bitter chuckle. I wonder if a part of me didn't want to see it, didn't want to empathize with Gaara, didn't want to make the same realization I did a few years ago. And that was, Yang asked, if I had never pestered Kurama, never started to prank others or made friends, I could have very well ended up like Gaara did. Naruto said gravely. The revelation stunned Yang, and the two blondes sat in silence beneath the moon for a few minutes. After those minutes wore up, Yang's hand slipped around Naruto's and squeezed his hand. It was all that was needed for the both of them. Yang now realized how vastly different Naruto could have been had he not made friends at his young age. How different her life could be now. As strange as it sounded, Naruto was her best friend in Beacon, possibly the first best friend she really could understand, one that understood and accepted her for who she was beneath the mask. What would her life be like without that friend? She wondered, realizing that her thoughts were trading into dangerous waters. Yang quickly decided to restart the conversation. So, how did you two fight when he was supposed to fight Sasuke? Oh, he fought Sasuke, but this was Sasuke before he'd become the lovable asshole he was today, Naruto said. He chuckled. Little arrogant bastard. He's the one guy aside from Kurama who really knows how to get on my nerves. Back then it was worse. We had a rivalry of sorts, so any one sentence could set us off. I disagree. Sasuke fought against Gaara, but used the replicated attack based off of our teacher semblance. I guess that it was his mistake. What was his mistake? Sasuke was the first person to make Gaara bleed. Sasuke, dressed in a high-collared black outfit with tape and an elbow pad up his right arm, quickly jumped away from the sphere of sand that he'd penetrated with his lightning-like attack. There was a pause, and a confused hush spread across the audience. Naruto, from his place among the other competitors, cringed when an anguished yell escaped the hole. My blood! That's my blood! Ah! It hurts! A wrapped mound of sand formed over the hole and shot out towards Sasuke. It changed itself into a claw-like arm with red blood coated along the sand. Sasuke retreated from the sand appendage, and an explosion came from both deeper into the village. It's the fourth wall! A sentry yelled was cut off as he was decapitated. People screamed and began to panic as more explosions filled the village. Sasuke was frozen, and Naruto, for the first time in his life, felt true fear as Sand encased his rival/friend. Oh my god, Yang said softly. She winced as Naruto's hand tightened slightly around hers and shone gold as his semblance started to come to life. Her hair shone as her semblance kicked in to protect her, and it built up alongside his as his grip continued to tighten. They attacked us while our guard was down, and Gaara was a part of it. Naruto growled loudly, his eyes squeezed shut as he fought some unsavory memories back into his subconscious. Naruto, please let go of my hand. Yang's voice broke Naruto from his silent rage. He quickly released her hand and sent her an apologetic look. She put her hand on his arm gently. Are you all right? Naruto cracked a small smile. I nearly broke your hand and you ask me if I'm alright? Hey, I just told you to let go, now that it was nearly broken, Yang said with her own small grin. She gave Naruto a light punch in the arm. I'm tougher than most girls, Naruto. You don't have to remind me, Yang, Naruto said with a chuckle as he rubbed his arm. The small banter has gotten him to calm down, and they fell back into a comfortable silence. The couple listened to the sounds of Beacon's calm night for a few minutes before Naruto spoke again. Gar and I, we didn't have some grand battle or some magical epic fight like out of the Four Stars or Justice Brigade or anything special like that. He said, we didn't pause to have philosophical debates or taunt each other or cry out attacks. I didn't try and talk him out of it like a real hero would have. Ours was a fight of instincts, so I wouldn't remember a lot of the details, but I remember the rush, the adrenaline coursing through my veins because of my fear and excitement. Other than that, the only thing I can remember clearly is how the fight ended. Gara had me trapped in a cocoon of sand. Naruto struggled against the sand as it slowly constructed around his limbs. His semblance, as much as he could muster, flickered pitifully and illuminated the darkness of his current prison. He could see the sand slither around his arms and felt it construct around his windpipe. Naruto's eyes went wide as he realized that this very well could be where he died. There was to be no morning parade, no monuments to his honor, and no spinning newspaper that would reveal it all with a flashy large headline that read "The Great Naruto Uzumaki dead." With just 1 second, one good squeeze, and Naruto was going to end up like a used ketchup packet. To hell with that shit! Naruto swore to the people of this village, of his home, that he would be the best damn hunter on the planet. He couldn't do that if he was dead, and some freak with raccoon eyes, no offense to any bandit like Faunus meant, was not going to stop him. Not now, not when he was on a hot streak. Naruto's body exploded with aura when the sand sharply constricted around him in an effort to kill him. The binds around his limbs failed to snap them, and Naruto's airway remained intact. In fact, it started to feel easier to breathe. Naruto couldn't understand it at all. I couldn't understand at the time, but his body was exerting so much aura that it was overpowering Garo's semblance. The minuscule amount of Garo's aura within each grain of sand could not withstand the waves of Naruto's aura that were sent against them. The cocoon was being forced to open, and Naruto Uzumaki was going to live. Naruto was mad. No, he was furious. He wanted to stop between Gaara's um, attacks on not only himself but also his friends, and the Fourth War's attack on his village. Naruto's patience had worn thin. The 12-year-old boy exploded from the cocoon and rushed at the monstrosity that Gaara had become with his sand. In hindsight, Gaara's monster form was hilarious. He looked like an obese raccoon dog or something, with a little Gaara sit at the top of his head. Despite the ridiculous appearance, Naruto scaled the massive form in record time and ran at the awestruck redhead. He jumped at his target and primed his arm for a punch, but sand caught his limbs once more before Naruto's face could collide with Garo's face. Inches from satisfaction. Typical. No, my existence will not end. Garo snarled at him. Naruto scowled and struck with his binds. He reared his head back while he tried to free his limbs. More sand started to rise up and encase his form once more. Naruto refused to lose here. He was not going to let this sympathetic punk kill him or any of his friends. He wasn't going to let anyone else die. Doing the only thing he could, Naruto flung his head forward. Their foreheads collided, but not even Gaara's sand armor could withstand the density that Naruto's semblance had given the blonde. Gaara's skull cracked like an egg on the concrete and blood rushed out of the wound. Naruto, while having a splitting headache from the impromptu attack, was not as damaged. The two boys fell to the ground and the fight ended. One was stunned into a state between consciousness and unconsciousness while he lay on the back. The other tried to cradle his throbbing head and got to his feet at the same time with little success. Both were unaware that the former's injuries caused an internal bleeding that would hemorrhage in the brain. Gaara died 5 days later while imprisoned in Khan's jail. Naruto finished the story of the boy whose early life mirrored his own. He was buried in an unmarked grave along with the other dead Four War members. He didn't deserve that. Yang frowned. As far as she could see, Gaara was as much a victim as he was a monster. Yes, his past had resulted in him becoming what he was, but he still chose to believe in the way that he did. However, to be buried in an unmarked grave, to be forgotten after going so far to ensure that he would not be forgotten, she felt that it was too cruel a burial for a misguided killer. He didn't. Naruto nodded in agreement, which is why a few months later I made a grave for Gaara in the middle of Bakuro's desert while I was on a training excursion of sorts. Yang arched a brow. Care to elaborate on that? Not really. It's a family thing, Naruto said as he glanced down at his parents' rings. He looked back at his girlfriend and gave her a light smile. Any other questions? Why do you blame yourself? It was an accident, wasn't it? Yang asked. An accident means that it could have been prevented. My godfather hypothesized that because I hadn't been able to control my output of my semblance, the result probably would have ended the same either way, so I had to work on my control. Dato explained. He lifted his right hand up and stared at his palm before he crushed it into a fist. The day he told me that, I promised myself I would not lose control of my semblance of myself ever again. I swore that I would never go to that control of my semblance of never go to that far. I killed Gara, not intentionally, but it was still my fault. Could doctors have saved him? Possibly, but with so much more pressing injuries on our side and the loss of one of Kon's primary elders, no one gave him a second thought. You did. Yang placed a hand on top Naruto's clenched fist and smiled at him. You are a good person, Naruto. Most people would chalk Gaara's death up to an accident and leave it as such, blame it as bad karma that was bound to get him for his past deeds, or label it as justice. You instead chose to regret your part in Gaara's death and grieve for him, despite him being your enemy. The fact that you care, I think that would have caused Gaara to forgive you if he could. Maybe, Naruto said as he looked at her hand over his and gently smiled. I like to think in another life we could have been good friends. I don't doubt it, Yang said as she leaned against Naruto while lowering his hand. She pressed her lips against Naruto's gently when his head turned so that she could look at her. When they parted, Yang grinned at Naruto's confused face. What was that for? He asked. For being you. Yang rested her head on Naruto's shoulders and closed her eyes, her smile still in place. You know something? I think I could really get used to this. What, sitting on a bench late at night and listening to a good-looking guy reveal his deepest and darkest secrets to you? Naruto asked as he looked down at her with amusement glistening in his eyes. His left arm moved to drape over her shoulders, and his gaze went down to his right hand in her grasp. That's not unappealing, though. Yang joked back with a small smirk when her lilac eyes opened and stared into his two ocean-like blue orbs. The smirk dwindled into a content smile. But I was talking about us. Naruto smiled back at her and once more intertwined his fingers with hers. Us. It has a really nice ring to it. Catchy even. His musings made her laugh. My thoughts exactly. Yang let her eyes drift close once more and relaxed on the bench with her boyfriend. Can we go walk? Can we go talk to Asuma and Kurenai tomorrow? Oh crap, I forgot that we were supposed to do that. Naruto groaned. We really should just bite the bullet and get it over with. But I'm comfy. Yang whined. Yeah, and Kurenai's probably wondering how scared Blake is from my psychological attack. Naruto sighed as he nudged his displeased girlfriend. Not to mention curfew is in a bit. You know how that whole song and dance goes. Ugh, so not fair. Yang mumbled as she regretfully rose from the seat, with Naruto doing the same. I know, but we can chill some more tomorrow, the day after class on Monday. Naruto weakly suggested as he remembered that his team needed one day to prepare the music, and the day after was for the dance. That left after class as the only real free time they had. Fine, Yang mumbled sourly. She crossed her arms under her bust and let Naruto move his arms from over her shoulders to rest under her waist. But I want at least an hour of tranquility without any petting or kissing. I don't know if I'll be able to hold out for Xiao Long. Naruto grinned. Yang elbowed Naruto with a snort. That was so bad. I think you just made your ancestors roll over in their graves. Sue me. I'm a little emotional and mentally exhausted. Let's just go chat with Asuma so you can call it a night. Now that I can agree with. End of chapter 17.